Okay, welcome to another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Here we are as I'm recording this. This is Wednesday, November 6th of 2024. So if you are watching this in my future, some of the things that I might mention, admin announcements or whatever, might be a little out of date, okay? But otherwise, everything should be universal. Okay, so again, Daichi Han Miller here from Warrior Concepts. We are here in East Central Pennsylvania, an hour north of Harrisburg, about an hour north or south of Williamsport, if you know where those things are, 2.5 hours northwest of Philadelphia. So if you're in the area, feel free to stop in, train with us. Otherwise, just keep doing what you're doing online. Okay, so got a bunch to, as usual, I have a lot to go through, but I've tried to synthesize it down, and hopefully my little outline here will keep me from, I don't know, going too far, keeping you from, scrolling on cat videos or whatever that you do. Anyway, all right, so the topic this week is actually on a concept called Maai. Maai. And I'm not saying my eye really fast, right? Maai. We'll get to those, right? So Maai. But I want to cover 3 of these things. But before I get into that, let me just kind of lead off with something that my teacher, Hatsumi Sensei, 34th Grandmaster of the Togakure School and 8 other, well, that used to be lesser known martial arts, but most people know these things now. But now there's a 35th generation, and there's all these other soke. He has retired. But throughout my martial training and my years and decades of doing this stuff, he had this saying, right? That he or she, right, who controls the distance, controls the fight. Okay, control the distance to control the fight. Okay, as a matter of fact, in his series of Quest videos, Quest is a Japanese video production company. I don't know if they just focus on martial arts things or not. Not really the point, but he has this long series of things, and in the title sequence, instead of it popping up and saying ninjutsu or any given thing like that, right, it just, as the credits, the introductory kind of thing rolls, and then it kind of moves in on him as he's opening a class in the dojo. It says Masaki Hatsumi's martial arts of distance. Okay, is like this it's not it's not the thing, but it is one of the top 4, right? 4 principles and concepts within the Bujinkan. And what I've always told people is that, techniques, you could have a million different variations of things, but ultimately everything boils down to just a handful of principles and concepts. Now, there are subsets, obviously, right? If we're looking at the Tongo no Jutsu from the Togakure school, or any of those things for escape and evasion and whatever, okay? But when it comes down to taijutsu, I know a lot of people say Budo Taijutsu, and it's not that's not true. I tend to lean into the term Ninpo Taijutsu because it is inclusive of Budo Taijutsu and then a bunch, and then there's an element in there that changes everything. Okay, so again, his quote was control the distance, control the fight. Okay, and so what I would finish with is easier said than done. Okay, there are a lot of elements to make this happen. Okay, so to kind of give some context to this, what I normally do is I choose a theme for the week, right? I choose a kind of a topic that we're going to look at, and then as we move through the different things, beginning on Monday with my Kukan radio, my podcast show, which is more about applying these principles and concepts across the board, not just for self-defense, but in life, for success, those kind of things. That's where it gets its kickoff or its introduction. And then I pick some aspect of that for our Whiteboard Wednesdays that is a little easier for most people to get their heads wrapped around for a tactical, strategic way of operating in an actual attack scenario. Okay, not about any given techniques, but I may reference some techniques, but it's not about any given technique. It's the stuff that it brings the techniques to life, right? So what I've often taken to saying is, what I'm giving you during Whiteboard Wednesday are not self-defense techniques in and of themselves, but they have everything to do with self-defense. Okay. That being said, during this this training, one of the things we're going to take a look at is actually using distance as a weapon. Okay, using distance as a weapon. I know, right? I'm going to repeat it again later, but either way, okay? So anyway, during Whiteboard Wednesday, during Kukan on Monday, covered 4 different types of sensing, right? Tactile sensitivity. We kind of talked about that in previous episodes, right? This idea of SHITEN, SHITEN, for those of you who are trying to write it all down in notes. SHITEN, tactile sensitivity, is one thing, right? But we actually covered 4 different areas. We covered SAKI, right? Which is murderous intent, or what we might call the force of the killer, which to me sounds a little bit less imperative than murderous intent, okay, or the killing intent, right? Somebody, what's coming at you is this thing, right? So we dove into that, and then that's this projected stuff, and then we also took a look at something called kokoro no me, okay? Kokoro, heart or mind, no me, right? Eyes, okay? So the eyes of the heart, the eyes of the mind. I know some of the stuff can sound kind of woo, but where Saki is the thing that he projects, his intent as he's coming in, kokoro no me is the receiver, right? The body, mind, core nature that has been developed so that I can actually pick up on those things, okay? So there's a whole bunch of training in both areas for these, often within the Bujinkan training. Not a whole lot of talk about kokoro no me. It's just kind of tossed in with Saki, and then, you know, you need to be able to feel it, okay? And then we also talked about kan, right? Kan, right? And so not the kan like in Bujinkan, right? That means hall. Not the kan, although I will mention that today. There's a kan that I've talked about in the past that means gap or interval, spacing, that kind of thing. We'll talk about that a little bit today, but what we're really focusing on from this sensing, perceptual or perceptive awareness kind of level is kan being like intuition, okay? Being intuitive about things. And it's not just this, just this mental woo-woo kind of thing. It's allowing, knowing that all of this input is coming in through your 5 senses on a regular basis, and then being compared against past experiences and what that tells you about things and whatnot. And so when he moves and he's doing things, right, you're not left brain intellectually assuming or guessing or anything like that. You're letting the subconscious, unconscious processes work with those things and tell you certain things about where you need to move, where he's going, what his mood is, or how things might have shifted or changed. Okay, so again, I'll do definitions here in just a bit. And then we also talked about this concept of Maai, okay, Maai. So anyway, just a quick outline of what I'm going to be covering during this training, just so you know whether you're in the right place or not, okay? So we're going to define Maai. We're going to define Kukan, right? This is a very common concept in Bujinkan. We talk about a lot, and often these things aren't discussed. It's all kind of thrown into one word, kind of like the Saki thing. So what I want to do is break things out a little bit here, and we'll define them, but we're also going to take a look at how they interconnect and how they relate to each other, because they're not the same, okay? And again, you know, we can operate based on, well, I use this one word, but it could mean this, or it could mean this, or it could be, okay, great. Okay, but if we can split it out, we can be more precise about things, then we can train in a very specific area in a very specific way to hone very specific techniques or qualities. Okay, and that's my point, right? If that's too much for any given student or whatever, they're free to go anywhere else. I mean, the internet's full of like other videos and teachers and whatnot, so find the one that fits for you. But you know, I tend to go much deeper. I tie things into the psychology from our Mikyo training and all that. And I may mention some of that during this class as well. Okay, so we're going to take a look at these things. I want to take a look at the principles of Maai. We're going to split that into 3 subsets as well. Okay, and then we're going to take a look at three things that have to do with this Kukan, right? This idea in again, the Bujinkan Hatsumitsu Sensei has often talked about playing in space. This playing in space concept comes from the Gyokoryu, and is actually the feeling of the first kata on the first scroll, Kukan, right? Not Kukan, Koku. The feeling in that is playing in space, right? And it's not like a 3-year-old playing or whatever, but it's not like that either. Okay, it has the idea of being able to move freely to find the proper place, the proper thing, the proper angle, proper timing. There's a whole bunch of things to this, right? So when we talk about these, we're going to be talking about more than just physical distance, like the mind trying to do a measuring tape kind of thing. Okay, it's not that. I don't want to say it's not that simple, but it's not that just, here's a definition, right? As both Hatsumi Sensei and other teachers and Reverend Jikai, a Miko teacher, has always said that when we use any of these terms, they can, as long as we understand what we're conveying and the other person understands as well, it's not that we can't not use them. They just act as expedients, right? They're a place to start, right? But ultimately, it's like throwing Jello on the wall, right? Hoping that it sticks as a decoration. Okay, it'll stay for just long enough for you to appreciate the design, and then you'll have a whole different decoration as it slides down the wall. Okay. Again, we're going to take a look at these things more specifically. We're going to take a look at integrating Maai and Kan to dictate the flow of the encounter. I'm going to give you some suggestions for practice, obviously. What else am I doing? So we're going to be I'm also going to take a look at Maai as far as adjustment of distance within the Sanshin footwork. Okay, we have to remember when we look at the Sanshin patterns, if I just look at the base introductory set, okay, because there's actually 3 transmission levels to those. We have to remember that we're not just looking at 5 patterns, okay? Sanshin, 3 hearts, 3 cores, 3 really important things, right? So what we're looking at are in each model there is 3 things: there's footwork, there is a way to block or intercept or break his balance or disrupt his flow, and then there's an attack method, right? How do we get in there to strike him, that kind of thing, right? Sanshin is all about penetration, but I've often said that, but what people need to understand is that it's not just about how do we move in and deliver a strike, it's how do we do it by applying something that deceives or catches his mind or his body-mind core in a way that when we enter, there'll be little to no resistance, okay? Because he can't. Either his mind isn't there, the body is trying to catch itself because it's fighting gravity or inertia or whatever. It's not just a block punch kind of thing, right? This is not a substitution for other martial arts, okay? This is not doing the same thing everybody else is, but differently, right? Like a style thing, okay? This all begins with thinking about it differently, okay? And I know that's, here's a pun, hard getting our head wrapped around it, but that's the way it is, okay? So we'll take a look at those things. So I'll take a look at what we're looking at with these 5 footwork patterns, okay? And how they use distance, how they use Maai, right, to prevent him from being able to get at us or to allow us to maneuver at different ranges to get things done, okay? And then as long as I have time, along with this area right here, there's something down here where it's going to be about deception, but I want to talk about the role of Kamae in that because again, I can't drive home more. I can't do it enough to help students get past this very common thing where they're trying to associate Kamae as stances. Not only is the Japanese word different, but the very concept, stance and Kamae, very different. It's kind of like Budo and Ninpo. Okay? Budo is inclusive in Ninpo, but it doesn't necessarily work in the opposite direction. Same thing. Kamae have a stance-like quality sometimes, right? But they're way, way deeper, Okay, and the more of those things that we can tap into, the better. Okay, and here's one of those things I mentioned earlier. If you're watching this way past November, what, 8th, 9th, and so where are we? We're coming up on, so yeah, 8th, 9th, and 10th of 2024. If you're watching it after that, then what I'm about to say isn't going to matter unless you go to the website, maybe, I don't know, find recordings or something that we might have. But this weekend coming up is our fall camp. And the theme that I've attached to this year's fall camp is body, mind, spirit integration. So where you're going to be looking at not just physical, the physical part of a technique, where we're going to be talking about what the mind should be doing and where it should be at any given point in a technique, what it should be looking for, those kind of things. We're also going to be taking a look at the heart and spirit, or intent, right? And so if we pull those apart, work on each one individually, and put them back, that kamai, or that kata, or that technique, or your action and activity goes well beyond doing things to that thing having a life in and of itself. Okay, very, very interesting stuff. Okay, all right, so let's start off again. Hatsumi Sensei's quote, right? Control the distance, control the fight, that kind of thing. So let's just do a couple of translations here. I think I've got 16 pages of notes here. I'm going to try to synthesize down into 40 minutes to an hour. We'll see what happens. Okay, all right. So let's do, we'll do Maai, right? Okay, so Maai, right? Maai is conventionally translated as distance. Okay, distance, but it's not just distance. If you caught this past week's Monday's Kukan, Kuden, the podcast, what we were talking about with Maai was it's not just distance, it's spatial awareness. Spatial, be nice if I could spell. Spatial awareness. Okay, so it's sensing the distance, not necessarily doing an intellectual, like I said, measuring tape between here and there. Okay, so there's a lot more to that. Now, Maai, just like a lot of concepts, right? There is a physical, there is a mental, or there are mental, and there are spiritual, emotional, types of Maai. One type of mental aspect of Maai is psychology. Okay, it's timing, right? It has to do with timing, right? So as far as timing as a distance factor, right? Are we on time? Are we meeting something? Right? And there's actually a Japanese word for that. We'll cover that some other time. There is a being late. Okay, so he does something, or the target presents itself, and you're late. Okay, so there's a physical distance factor to that, but there's also a mental kind of thing to that, and there's also being early, that kind of thing, right? But from a mental aspect, from a psychological aspect, right? Where are you in your head relative to the moment that shit's happening? Okay, are you in the past? So are you not forward at this point, right? Are you thinking about something that happened or something you learned in class when you should be paying attention to him, right? Are you in the moment, right? Are you right there, okay, in contact, okay? Or are you future thinking, right? If he does this, I'm going, right? That's not being in the moment, okay? That's mentally where there's a detachment. Now, past, present, and future, whether or not they're right or wrong depends on the physical proximity you are, or where you are relative to him and his ability to get at you, okay? So it's okay to be future projecting or past projecting way outside his range, okay? So I'm basing past knowledge maybe on the way he's moving and assessing what kind of fight styles this guy has. Does it look like he's got some Taekwondo-ish, tic-tac-toe, whatever, right? That kind of stuff going on, so I can kind of assess and get an intuitive sense of what he's probably going to throw at me. Again, not guessing, because I'm always going to be open to what he's doing, regardless of what my experience or what my senses tell me is going on. I'm still always going to be neutral, clear, and paying attention, right? So I'm not looking for something, right? I get kind of intuitive sense of what's probably going to come, but I never let that rule my decision making ahead of time. Okay, when I'm in there and things are flying, right, then I better be in the moment. I call that Zen mind, right? No thinking in words, no past, present, or nothing. I got to deal with what's going on in here. Okay, so that's more of a feeling my way through, and then future tense again, right? It could be as I'm moving in, or it could be either after the event or what we're doing now, right? Or in a class where we are preparing for dealing with this particular type of an attacker potentially in the future. Okay, so again, it's kind of a different thing, right? Same thing. Where's the heart, right? Am I neutral, open, and just watching, right? I won't say ready for anything, but you get the idea, right? Where I'm open and whatever he throws, perfectly okay with me, right? Do what you want, right? Or am I hesitant? Am I concerned about the safety of somebody else? Am I imperative, right? I've got this, I got this need, I got to get in there because I either need to win, I need to get him first, or I need to not die, okay? Or where's the heart, right? What's driving things, okay? So where's the mind, where's the heart, that kind of thing, okay? So again, again, it's not just physical, okay? So covered that. So let's take a look at this idea of Kukan, right? Kukan, again, it's another one of those invisible things in the art. And if you've been around for a while, you've heard this word a lot. Kukan. We call this the space of potential. We call it the invisible shield, that kind of thing. There's a distance between he and I where there's an edge to that. And it's not from here to his chest or targets, it's from the leading surface to those, okay, to his, right? So the rule of thumb for the Kukan is I don't put anything in there that I'm not willing to give up for the rest of my life, okay? I need to make sure I maintain the Kukan, I control the Kukan, and I control them with the Kukan, okay? But Kukan itself, as a straight definition, just means empty space. What the hell, right? That's helpful. Empty space. Yeah, but Kukan, again, while it literally means empty space, okay, in the Bujinkan, it refers to more than just a physical area, okay? It encompasses I'll have a better way to describe this, the totality of the combat environment. Everything that's within that bubble that you need to be paying attention to. Could be environmental, could be like it's environmental, but it could be the ground surface, could be what each of us is wearing. Does that help or hinder certain actions or not? Distance, weapons that are being held, whole thing. But again, not just physical distance, right? Mental, emotional, spiritual, that kind of thing, right? Are there other people involved? Are there cameras rolling? Whatever. All of these things influence not just the physical space, but the space where this experience is taking place. Okay, the actions don't just happen in a space. The actions are also influenced by the space and the things that are in that space. Okay, very different, right? So again, it's the totality of everything in the environment, including the energy, intent, the possibilities that exist within it, those kind of things, right? So the Kukan is, we could say it's a three-dimensional field that the practitioner learns to navigate and control. But my students that are involved in the Mikyo training understand that we're not talking about 3 dimensions, we're talking about 10 dimensions, okay? First 5 are associated with your five senses, right? 5 consciousness levels, but there are it's a 10-dimensional realm or a 10-dimensional space. So time is involved, intent, energy, those kind of things are involved. Okay. So again, just generally speaking, in the Bujinkan, understanding Kukan is about perceiving all potential, right? All potential vectors, avenues, options, those kind of things of movement and attack, right? Even those that may not be immediately apparent, right? One of the things I always tell students is, if we were doing what everybody else was doing, I can't speak for anybody else, including in this art, including in the Bujinkan. If we were doing what everybody else was doing, then we'd be fighting the same way everybody else is fighting. We'd be thinking about things the same way, and we would just have our ninja style or ninja twist on it. But it's not that, okay? What I'm trying to train people to do is the same thing that Hatsumi Sensei and Reverend Jikai and all these other teachers that I've had have helped me understand, is a master sees things that most people don't even know are going on. They don't even know these things exist, let alone that you can control them or do anything with them. Okay. So this is not the same thing as trading shots. This is not the same thing as fighting like everybody else, but better or different or whatever. Okay. It's different from its very inception because of the way you process the world, not because of some kind of blind allegiance or obedience or something like that to a style or ritualized system. That's not the same. Okay, which in and of itself is a type of Maai, right? It's a type of how am I distancing myself, or where am I along the progress or the path as I'm developing, right? Am I just doing the same physical things? I just got better at them, so I can do them faster or trickier or whatever, or am I seeing things differently? So are these, is this assimilating, right? So here's the thing. If we were to just kind of broaden things out just a little bit more, Kukan is the entirety of things. Okay, I call it, whenever you hear me talk about the bubble, I'm talking about the Kukan. Okay, Maai is an aspect of the Kukan. Okay, so we could be talking about what you often hear is as far as base principles, right? We have timing, distancing, angling, flow, those kind of things, right? So timing, distancing, angling, right? You have naname, right? We've done Whiteboard Wednesdays on naname, that's angling and whatnot. We're going to relate angling to Maai today, because when I go to a certain angle, does that increase the distance, increase the space? Does it diminish the space? Or can I move to another point in space by using lateral or angling movement and keep the space the same? So I haven't moved farther away. I still have access to him, but he still doesn't have access to me. Or, am I in a position where, he can't get to me, but I can't get to him easily either? Okay, so we're going to talk about some of that stuff here in these three categories of Maai. Okay, so again, Maai is a part of Kukan, just like Ritsudo, rhythm, a type of timing. Japanese don't have a word for timing. When we talk about Ritsudo, we talk about breath or rhythm, or this kind of a harmonious connection or disconnect. When we talk about Nagore, flow, that has a timing aspect as well. So if you ever hear the Japanese use the word timingu, right, they're just taking this English language thing and using it as an expedient so Westerners understand timing, that we're talking about timing, right? Because they don't normally talk about timing. Flow has its own timing. Distancing creates timing. The farther away, the greater the time it takes to get from point A to point B. The closer, you get the idea, right? Okay. So this is the thing, right? That needs to be controlled. We need to gather information from. We need to take into account. We can use it or avoid certain things because it'll hinder things. Or when we're using it, we're actually using it so it hinders him. When we're avoiding something that would hinder us, we're making sure he can't use it against us. You get the idea, right? Okay. So this is the whole thing. This is that we're going to take a look at this distance as far as playing in space. Okay. Anyway, and then kan, right? Kan, I've already mentioned this kind of thing, right? So there's a kanji that very much looks like a big part of it looks like the kanji for jutsu, right? For the path, the way, techniques, art, that kind of thing, right? But there's a difference. It's what's in the little window under the gate. Okay, but that kan refers to a gap or an interval or a space. Has a timing kind of aspect, right? Very, very common in martial arts. But this often in the martial arts, again, is thrown up under Maai. Okay, so what do I understand is that there are these things, but depending on the art you're looking at or the lesson you're getting or whatever, somebody be talking about this, but they're talking about this, right? Because Maai, distance, does discuss a gap, an interval, right? A space, but it's not necessarily the same thing, okay? There could be a gap in somebody's movement, or there could be a timing aspect to it, interval, right? Like if you play music, right? You can read music, right? You have fourth note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, those kind of things. How long am I holding that tone, right? Okay, so very different, right? The kan we're talking about, though, represents intuition. Right? Intuition. It also refers to perception. And it refers to kind of a sense of awareness. Different kanji. Okay, different kanji. All right. So again, I'm going to keep referring back because it's this week is all the same theme. When we talked about sensing during the Kukan podcast, what we're looking at here with this kan is when it comes to perception, when it comes to what we were talking about was perceptive awareness, okay, and sensing what's going on. This kan, this intuition, what this is sensing or recognizing changes in the environment. Okay, that chair could be there, right here, and so I'm navigating based on not tripping over the chair or whatever. But the chair is also a potential. I could grab it and use it, but as I'm moving around, somebody could grab it and move it out of the way. Well, the environment just changed. Again, this is one very, very tiny little piece, right? But at the same time, if he moves to my left, his right, and I shift this way, the chair's no longer to my right rear diagonally like it was right here, right? It's now behind me. So in that case, from that perspective, the environment changed. If for no other reason than my alignment and positioning relative to it. This kind of has to do with Kudai Dori and stuff like that from Koto Ryu. Kudai Dori, even though it's not literally mentioned, is a huge part of Gyoko Ryu because Gyoko and Koto go together like this. Remember, these two schools that seem like they're completely different, right? One circular movement, close range, very, very, very manipulative and stuff like that. The other one, long range, angling, minimal movement, very aggressive, take this person down with one finger, that kind of thing. But they were organized by the same guy out of the same body of knowledge. That knowledge was just divided based on principle and concept. Okay. So anyway, so what we have are three things here that have to do with distance, okay, or they have to do with space and how space is created, the size of space, distance, right? How things change. Let me go back to kan here for a second because I almost forgot. Kan is not just sensing a change in the environment. It's also being sensitive and being able to perceive a change in his mood, his energy level, right? If you understand the glycogen stores in the muscles and how you only have about a 7 to 11 second burst for like going all out kind of thing. If you watch a wrestling match, if you watch MMA guys or whatever, there'll be a flurry, pow, 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 or they'll be on the ground, right, maneuvering and trying to get it. And then all of a sudden, one or both of them will go into a holding pattern. And it's not that they're not doing things, but they're trying to keep the other guy from doing anything. What's happening is the glycogen it's a sugar in the muscles to allow for burst of speed, right? Otherwise, the muscles have to use fat to prolong things. You don't have that kind of time in an actual situation. So fat burning in the muscles, duration, sugar, it's like a wind sprint kind of thing, okay? So there's this holding, and while they're holding, the body is putting glycogen back in, because then you'll see after about a 7 to 11 second pause, right, there'll be a flurry of things, and then, right, so that kind of thing is going on. So can I be sensitive to that? But can I also be sensitive to his mood, right? So there may be a lull in his action because of exhaustion. He needs to catch his breath, or the glycogen store kind of thing, or whatever. And that can create a gap for me, right? That's a different kind of con. Can create a gap or an interval that I can exploit for either escaping or tagging his ass. Or it could be a mood shift, right? He could have thrown his best thing at me, and I did a little evasion, popped him a good shot, and then readjusted. Or every time he tries to get at me, he's missing. So what is that frustration doing to him? Is it jacking him up? Is it lowering? Is it bringing him back down? Is it creating? And we'll talk about other things as well. That if I employ a certain kind of tactic or if I take up a certain kamae, right? Does it create confusion? Does it create hesitancy? Does it create that kind of thing, right? So, right. I'll try to remember during this one. If I don't make it happen during this one, there is something I want to discuss about kind of an order that students should be focused on for priorities based on overall proficiency level. And if I don't get to it in this class, I'll make sure that during our Friday virtual class, where we put this stuff into use with actual physical techniques, that I mention it there, okay? But everything starts off with being really, really good at kamae evasion, not just because you're getting really good at not being hit, right? Being untouchable kind of thing. But the better you get at that, where you don't have to think about where your freaking foot goes, or you don't have to think about which kamae you're going to do, or what you're going to do next, or you get rid of all that freaking mental chatter, right? You have the ability then to, while evading, observe, watch how he punches, watch his timing, watch his recovery, and those kind of things, right? Because when it's time to go, instead of just fucking picking something or doing my favorite, right? We're going to do the thing that matches exactly what will take him based on his fight style. Okay. So the first level of skill proficiency should be to allow the attacker to lead the fight. Let him lead the dance, because it's really like a dance. Okay. Except that in these dances, the guy always falls down. But either way. Okay. So again, those the basics, right? So again, in the Bujinkan, both Maai and Kukan are fundamental principles, okay? And these things influence how we as practitioners, right, do or are supposed to perceive and how we're supposed to move within and ultimately control that combat space, okay? Way too many people just talk about the Kukan space, okay? But once you know not just what it is, because theoretical is nothing. If we can't practically apply that knowledge, it's shit, right? It only works in a dojo setting, or people arguing on a freaking Facebook thread, or some other kind of bullshit that goes on in the world. If we need to be able to apply it, right? Under duress and whatnot. And that's where drills and sparring and certain types of randori practice and those kind of things come in, okay? So, but either way, while these concepts they're often discussed separately. I've talked about that already, right? They are deeply, deeply, deeply interconnected, right? And this is not my belief. This is something that was passed on from the big man and these master instructors and stuff. This is something that we don't just need to hear and be able to repeat that they're connected. It's hard to explain. No, it isn't. it's very easy to explain once you know what it is, right? But it requires a thorough understanding of their relationship that actually produces the end result and can elevate your practice, my practice, your ability in a stressful situation, stuff, mine, right? Not just a little bit, right? But significantly, okay? And that's, hope that's the goal. Anyway, all right. So let's jump into 3 basic categories of Maai, right? I'm actually going to break that out into 4 here in a bit because of the way I tend to classify things. And again, you may or may not have gotten this within the Bujinkan. Let's be very, very clear. I am a Bujinkan Daishihan, but not everything that I'm teaching has come as a result of Hatsumi Sensei teaching me that thing and I'm just regurgitating it, right? I mean, that would just be a puppet, right? Or a recording, or some other teacher or whatever. Are those things in there? Absolutely. But this comes from years as a police officer, security specialist and whatnot, actually applying this stuff on the street, that kind of experience, being in the dojo, sparring, that kind of stuff, and recognizing these things and then doing more and more research to find, you know, what's a good Japanese martial arts term for this thing? Like, you know, some people just call footwork tai sabaki, right? Well, that's footwork, right? Because it's for evasion. And tai sabaki means body management, right? We could say ashi sabaki, right? But that's still not footwork. It's leg management, right? But in the Gyokoryu, in their Kihon Happo, not the techniques, right? The study areas, right? There is something called ashiho. Okay, ashiho is ways of using the legs. Okay, but in other martial systems, that's called sokuho no budo or budo no sokuho. Okay, martial arts of the legs. It's the same freaking thing. It points to understanding the legs, how they work, how to best use them to maneuver and to do things that you need to do quickly, use them as weapons, use them as mobility devices, those kind of things, but also how they can be damaged and injured. Okay, so it's all of these things are study things. Okay, people learn gyakute, they learn wrist reversals, and I'm not saying they have to, right? We get through life without understanding how breathing works, and for most of us, it works okay. But, right, if we understood how the wrist was built and how this unit kind of goes together and how this is connected to this and this, we might be able to apply wrist reversals not only better or harder or more painfully or what most people think of, but in a way that locks his elbow and shoulder, controls his spine, and immobilizes his feet. Interesting, huh? Anyway, all right. So let's jump into these. All right. So again, Maai focuses on dynamic distance between opponents. All right. The Maai in a situation, just like the Kukan, just like the space itself, is dynamic. It's always changing. Right. What gets ego to think that it's one set thing is static training. Uke punches, I do technique, da da da. But during the technique, space grows or forms in certain areas as our bodies move away from it or recover out of it, just like the space between our legs, space between our arm and body, space changes, right? Okay. Certain space grows, certain space diminishes, or certain places space diminishes or shrinks, and in other places never changes. Okay. I just covered this during last night's class with folks. Okay. So again, different categories. And again, this is just a broad-based kind of thing, right? So the first category is called to Maai. Okay. To Maai. Okay? We know Maai is distance, spatial, that kind of thing, right? So to Maai, right? To Maai is long distance. Okay. But this long distance is out of range. It's too far apart for either of us to get the other person. And of course, that's going to differ based on weapon system, right? Because somebody could be out of range for my sword, but not out of range for my pistol, right? Out of range for my knife, but not for the sword, or out of range for the knife, but not for a hanbo, or a tire iron, or a pull cue, or whatever, okay? So when we're studying weapons, we have to understand the Maai how the weapon and movement and what kind of Kukan I need, right, to be able to move in, and then understanding the nature and advantages, disadvantages, and all that kind of stuff of that weapon to be able to get a feel for where the person's coming next and whatnot. Because shit happens really, really fast in a fight. You don't have time to left brain think something, okay? Which is why a lot of people need to stop doing just step-by-step stuff, right? Well, we don't spar in the Budokan. Yeah, no, they don't spar in Japan in Hombu. And Hatsumisa has already explained this. Not my fault that either one, people weren't in these classes, or two, the people who were in those classes didn't get the word out to everybody else. And there's lots of reasons why they didn't. However, okay, there's a lot of reasons why we don't do certain training, like we do soft training and all that kind of stuff. Why we don't do banging, knocking somebody around and whatnot, because Hatsumi Sensei did not want international incidences to occur because a foreigner visitor on a visitor's visa got injured not only in Japan but by a Japanese national. And then there's not just this whole that kind of legal thing, but there's also like Japan is on a national healthcare thing, and it doesn't matter if the other country is as well, but who covers the hospitalization and all that, or transportation of the body, you know, whatever. Okay, so there's lots of reasons for not doing certain things. So we have to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of seeing that whatever happens at Hombu in Japan is all there is to training. Okay, that's a huge. It's a whole other can of worms. Anyway, so we have Tolmai, right? This long distance, out of range. I can't reach him. He can't reach me. Okay, and then there is Tikamai, right? Tika. My Latin speaking friends, I learned some Spanish and whatnot as well. Not that kind of chica. Okay. All right. So chica, although we could use the word sweet. Okay. So chikamai. Okay. Chikamai is close range. Okay. But I don't mean like grappling distance and those kind of things when I'm talking about close range. Because when I talk about ranges where we are out of range, we're at long range, where typically it's going to be punches, kicks, or not punches, either ski, those kind of punches, or kicking techniques, or weapons are involved or whatever. Okay. And then mid-range, typical punching, maybe some grabbing and whatnot, right? And then there's close range grappling and whatnot. And then there's very close range where striking conventionally with the hands and arms and whatnot are more difficult. It's going to be elbows, shoulders, headbutts, those kind of things. And then there's too close range, TOO, hyphen close, right? So not the same, right? If this is out of range, then this is in range, right? Where punches, kicks, strikes, and all that can be applied. Okay, again, this is very, very, very generalized. Okay, so this is out of range. Chikamai, sweet distance, okay, where attacks are possible. But here's where ninjutsu shines. Okay, now this is a general Japanese martial arts term, but there is a nuance to this that makes all the difference between martial arts, Budo, and the way ninjutsu applies, right? Combat techniques. Okay, this is called Isoku Ito no Mai. Okay, so Isoku, yeah, Isoku. Ito, which means one blade. Okay, no Mai. Everybody should have Mai at this point, right? Okay, so Isoku Ito no Mai. Okay, typically this means like one cut distance, or one sword, one cut distance, that kind of thing. So it's the perfect distance for a single step and strike. Okay, a single step and strike. Right. So I'm just going to call this perfect distance. We're going to talk about this a little bit more because this is important. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to get to all of it during this one, but we'll give it a shot. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. very, very general, right? There's a lot to this. I'm going to mention something else over there in the Gyoko to you that combined, right? Understanding these things and applying this deception thing, everything changes. What is the perfect distance? What makes the distance perfect? Okay. Well, what makes the distance perfect is me understanding certain measurements, certain distances, right? Certain lengths, okay? If we can learn to use our body and our body parts to measure or to create measurements within the Kukan, okay, we can better not only control the Kukan, but we can better apply proper distance and movement and whatnot to always be in the right place, or based on the space we're in, know exactly which weapon or which part of our body to throw. Okay, interesting stuff. Okay, so here's the thing. I was taught a long time ago that I needed to not only know my height, but I also needed to know the length from my my waist, the top of that. This is the biggest joint you have in your body. Okay, to top of head, or at least to the shoulders. Okay, because when I'm moving, I need to know what that creates and how much space that takes up. But for somebody who's just getting started, here's what I would highly recommend: that you know the length of your arms. Okay, 2 fingertips, 2 knuckles, because that is half of, right? Okay, know these distances, and then know the distance of each of the pieces. That's how you're going to measure. Okay, because there's a leeway. And see, if most people think of caveman with style, right? A hit's a hit. But if the average self-defense situation or survival situation is over 2 to 10 seconds, every hit better be delivered like it's the only one you need, instead of just trading shots like I'm getting bragging rights, or I'm getting brownie points, or I'm getting points stacked up in a sport competition. So when they count them all up, they determine who the winner was if there wasn't a knockout. Not the same game. Okay, every strike, every technique needs to be delivered, including moving the kamae with an uke nagashi or an uke uchi, where you're hitting. Okay, everyone needs to be delivered like it's the only one you're going to need. We don't assume it's the only one we're going to need, but there's a lot of elements that go into making that a very powerful thing that will either affect him physically, mentally, emotionally, or many different parts at the same time to make him want to fucking go away, or allows me to put him away. Okay, so there are these things, right? But what makes the perfect distance? Okay, it's one thing to talk about this invisible space, but how much space do I need to deliver an effective forearm or elbow, whether it's rear, lateral, lifting, whatever. Okay, same thing if it's going to be a forearm, because I'm too close to get good power generation with a punch, but I'm too far away for an elbow. Can I clip him with some part? And then how does that happen? Well, we can talk about it, or we can get in the dojo and put targets at certain ranges, and then recognize that when I have no distance, well, how do I have perfect distance in there? What am I throwing? Right? So there is such a thing as having, you're so close to the guy that you don't have time for taijutsu. So you just hit him. Great. With what? Because if I have to haul off to hit him, I needed more distance to cover. More distance equals more time. I create a gap, interval, that he can exploit and nail me first. See, again, there's a difference between scientific study and application of things and just learning stuff. Because it's the way everybody else fights. You just got to be faster, trickier, whatever. Okay, yeah, okay. If that's what works for you, great. Hope you never get into a situation that's complex, or where the odds are not like an equal kind of thing. Okay? I've had conversations with students like this along the way, usually by internet, very rarely in the dojo. But there was a phase or a period in time We're just telling me how fuck, they can't. Somebody calls their mom a name, they can't not. Okay, great. Well, that's somebody telling me that their psychological or mental association with distance or their association with the Kukan doesn't extend beyond the moment that they're in this bubble. But what about the Kukan with a timeline aspect to it, where what happens an hour from now or a week from now or a year from now or anywhere in there, right? Because the universal law of cause and effect says that karma will follow you, right? So who's to say that somebody's not brewing and whatever, right? But then at some other point in time, what I hear from them is, oh, I used to be like that, but man, I'm older and slower now. So like, I'm more likely to talk myself out of things and like walk away. Yeah, okay. But did you choose that because of wisdom, or did you choose that because you can't do your bullshit stuff anymore? You know, they say wisdom is wasted on the, or what is it? Not wisdom is wasted on the youth. Wisdom comes too late, right? Okay. Life is wasted on the youth, something like that. Okay. So anyway, by mastering Maai, you learn to manipulate space to either neutralize threats or create opportunities for decisive action. Okay. But start off with like, how long is the leg? How long from the hip to the knee, right? What's effective knee strike range? Okay. Shin kick at what point, right? You're never going to find me doing instep kicks like they do in a lot of these martial arts. Story that Joe Rogan told one time, if you know the podcaster, he's also a fighter, back in his Taekwondo days, where he did a spinning wheel kick or a back kick on somebody so freaking hard, he laid this guy out. The guy was unconscious before he hit the ground, and he was unconscious for a half an hour. He thought he killed the guy, right? And after his teacher said, sometimes they die. He never realized that kind of stuff, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is his fucking heel hurt for days where he could barely walk. It's a good thing that everybody within that sport fight context has got to recognize for what it was. And it wasn't a situation where it got a little more complex, where somebody, friend, family, or whatever of the guy that he took out didn't hunt him down. Then he had to defend himself on a foot that he couldn't fucking move with, let alone kick with. Okay. So while you can do certain things, doesn't mean that the person has experience with actually using it. Okay. Anyway, all right. So again, based on my experience and lessons, again from various teachers, one of the things that I teach my students is that Maai also involves knowing the length, right? Knowing the length of the limbs, okay? And their individual parts and the length of what's the length of your normal gait, right? A normal step from Shizen. What is it when you're down into a good Ichimonji or somewhere in between? What's the length, right? Because we're looking for this sweet spot. We're looking what's perfect distance, okay? For you, for your body, not for Azumi Sensei, not for me, not for the tall guy in your class, or if you're the tall guy, not for the short people. What's perfect, okay? Is you have to operate within that, okay? So, but it's not just those things, but how to apply the footwork patterns taught within, we're just going to borrow the Sanshin, right? For advancing or stealing space. Okay? You know what I mean by stealing, right? Taking it from him, okay? Sometimes I'm advancing because I'm moving in to hit him or whatever. And sometimes I'm advancing to get into that space that he needs to do his thing. So just like in Mikyo, where like the wrathful guys like Fudomyo and Aizen and those kind of characters, they both have a compassionate side and they also have a wrathful side, okay? Any given movement could be for defense or for offense, even advancing things. Retreating things can have, like retreating in Ichimonji, pop this guy in the face while I'm backing up. That screws with his head, right? Because he sees me backing away, but he gets hit and knocked away, right? It's understanding distance and proximity, right? How close, right? Those kind of things. Okay. So again, that's the next one, right? Retreating. Okay. What else do I call this? Or creating space. So this is stealing space. This is creating space. Okay. So both of these, right? This is Chino Kata. For those who've been in the art for a while, this is Chino Kata. Right? This, when people see or talk about Chino Kata, they recognize stealing space because they recognize Chino Kata from this forward kind of thing. They'll see this as creating space and then this is taking space. But what if he's closing the distance and distance is diminishing, right? As you're backing up, it's closing where you can't step forward. As a matter of fact, you can't move forward at all because he's driving in too fast and you have to back out to deliver this. Okay? Either way, Chino Kata at the base level is striking while taking a full step. But see, there's the omote, what the model looks like, and there's the ura. You can take a full step back, have your body in the same inclined position, right? Same inclined position, but you ended up not this way. One, right? But do I incline my body because it gives me more reach because of this length plus this length? Or do I shift back into a seigan where my body is upright or reclining backwards because I need the space for this distance plus this distance? Okay, so we have advancing, we have retreating, we have what I call holding or maintaining space. Holding or maintaining space. Maintaining, okay, space. So this is this one is Sunokata. Sunokata. Some people might see this as also Kanokata or Hinokata, but I'll show you why I think it's different. We could be splitting hairs, but I separate it out because it's a strategy, it's a tactical reasoning, not just the way the feet are moving. Because if you're just looking at the feet, sure, we can throw Kanokata in there, but I'll show you why I'm splitting it out. Okay, so holding is that half step kind of thing. I call it Sanshin footwork, where you go from Ichimonji to Shizen to Ichimonji. See, my spine didn't leave this space. Okay, so I uke nagashi, right? I move into a certain spot because that breaks his balance. And from right here, I don't have room for a step. Okay? So I'm going to strike while maintaining this distance from him. So that's a holding or maintaining. Okay? The last one is what I call a protecting space. Okay? Protecting. Okay? Hopefully this will split things out. This is where I put Kanokata, and I'll talk about Kunokata here in a second. Okay, Kanokata. Okay, so Kanokata, for anybody that's noticed, you know that Kanokata is Hicho no Kata without the kick, and Hicho no Kata is Kanokata with a kick added. Okay, cool, right? Anyway, so protecting. I'm also going to also call this like moving to a safe. You know what? Moving to safety, and I'm going to put the word before and leave it at that. Okay, so follow me with Kanokata. Punch comes in, I check it, I reposition my leg, and then I move in. Okay, in Sunokata, I start moving in, realize I don't have the space, and instead of taking that full step like I would have in Chinokata, I take a half step to maintain that distance. Now, my rear foot may go to my front foot, so I'm almost like in a shizen. When I turn around, I could end up stepping forward of it. I could step behind it, whatever, but it's an adjustment of space on the fly during the attack, during my attack on him, okay? Chinokata is all out. I back up and I kill his ass, or I back up and oh shit, but I'm hitting him while I'm moving. It's an all or nothing kind of thing. Sunokata requires adaptation. The water around this water element represents adaptability, okay? Flexibility. So I'm adapting on the fly, moving in to do that shito, and then I need to adjust the space on the fly so that that still hits without a break in it, without any kind of hesitancy or a gap or anything like that, right? But Kanokata, I have moved beyond his range to deliver the uke nagash, and I need to change my orientation, my left-right kind of thing. So in Sunokata, the body changes position and targets, right? Good targets turn to face him for a microsecond, but he can't hit me because I'm controlling him and he's off balance and being disoriented and all that. So he can't access them anyway, right? In Kanokata, I'm stepping to a position of safety, out of range. Tomai, out of range. I can't hit him. He can't hit me, right? From here, I change my body alignment so my targets would have come to bear, but he can't reach me anyway. And then I move back in to take the shot, okay? So I am using space and distance as a protective shield. Okay? We never present our targets to them, to their weapons, for an easy shot. But Sensei, you turned your, yeah, I know we have other ones where you're in really, really close as well, okay? But Sensei, you're not supposed, he can't hit me, okay? If he can't access it while I'm doing it, I'm not breaking the rule, okay? The rule is don't present yourself when he can kill you, okay? So it's this kind of thing. And then when we're doing Kanokata, right? Everybody focuses on this, which is fine, gets his attention somewhere else. But the question is, when I kick, do I kick and follow through? Do I kick and shift back? Whatever. What's going on as I do these things? So again, if you understand the Sanshin, you have 5 different footwork patterns. One involves a kick, right? So the footwork becomes a weapon. You have 5 different ways of breaking their balance, mentally, emotionally, physically, those kind of things. And you have 5 different ways of delivering an attack. Okay. So again, it's 15 kihon no kihon, 15 basics within 5 models typically known as the basics. Okay. Right. So not as easy. Right. So let's see. I'm going to skip over those things. Maybe you'll get it some other time. Okay, so let's jump to the Gyokko-ryu's playing in space here really quickly before we wrap this up. Okay, so the Gyokko-ryu's concept, right, of playing in space. The thing I said was the feel of the kata koku, but in the Koto-ryu's Joryaku no Maki, that first level scroll. What is there, like 23 or 18 or whatever kata in that scroll? All of the kata on that scroll all point back to koku. They're all examples of this idea of finding the way, playing in space, freedom of movement, looking for very specific things, observing, finding the moment and taking it. Okay, that kind of thing. Okay, so generally we just call it playing in space. So this complements this idea, right, of Maai, right? In the Gyokko-ryu, space is not simply a void to be measured or moved through or traversed or whatever. In the Gyokko-ryu, that void, that Kukan, is seen as a living interactive field. We're going way past step by step, move to Ichimonji, Uke Nagash, Yoke. Okay? This becomes an entity. Oh, and by the way, you're inside of it, he's inside of it, because there's a Kukan that involves both of your bodies. When you're in Tomai, there's the Kukan that you're not wanting to enter unless you can kill him or you're willing to give up some part of you, right? Tikamai, right? And then there's that perfect distance. So when we're doing kata training, we're exploring what the perfect distance is with each move to do the next technique well at the correct angle, at the correct timing, right? No henka, no adjustment. So that when we're doing waza training, sparring, randori, whatever you want to call it, right? We can get an intuitive sense of when we're in a certain place and we see an opening, which weapon has to go, where, what, okay? Because we know not just how far it is and not just that it's open, but how much time it takes for any given weapon to traverse that space. Okay, interesting stuff, yeah? Okay, and if not, do that, take notes, later on down the line, pull them back out, and it'll make more sense, I promise, right? With diligent training, not the same type of training. We keep doing the same shit over and over again. It's kind of like the guy who has 10 years, he's worked at the same job for 10 years, and he's working at a company where if a job opens up, the guy with seniority based on time on the job gets the job, not because he has any fucking leadership skills or he has anything else. He just gets it because he's been there longer, okay? As opposed to the guy who just started 6 months ago or a year ago or whatever. And see, my problem with that, which is why we will never have that in the academy or any of my businesses, is because the guy who has 10 years on the job may have stopped learning 6 months in. So what does he have? Well, he has 6 months of learning and experience that he's just repeated 20 times. The guy who's been on the job for 6 months or a year may still be learning and studying and getting himself better and all that. He's showing me something very, very different. He didn't stop and then rest on his laurels and just loll out the job. Not given the job for a more responsibility, more observation, more management skills or whatever, paying attention to things and having to manage other people's growth and shit like that, to somebody who did something for 6 months and then they just keep fucking repeating it, right? Because it's good enough. Not putting somebody in a good enough position or that has a good enough attitude into a position that I need them to be in to help grow the company or grow the people that they're leading and stuff like that, because they're not growth oriented. That would be fucking stupid. Okay? That'd be like, being a baseball player. I guess it would be easier to be a baseball player and wearing a baseball cap to a football game than being a football player and wearing a football helmet to a baseball game. Okay. Anyway, all right. So what this means, what this living interactive field kind of thing and this Gyokoryu thing means, what this means is that every movement reshapes the opponent's perception of control. It creates opportunities or it creates vulnerabilities. Every movement, okay? Nothing stays the same. Just like if you're an instructor, every class that you teach, every student in that class is either one step closer to black belt or their next belt, or they're one step closer to the door. And I don't mean you need to placate them. I mean you need to speak to their listens and needs, or their listen and their needs, so that they always feel progress. And I don't mean like warm and fuzzy progress. I mean they're making breakthroughs. They have a reason to come back. You're associating lessons to real life, so this isn't a fucking hobby. As long as everybody operates like it's a hobby, then you're always going to have people quitting and joining and whatever. Because they join because they have fantasies and delusions of grandeur, but they quit because it's too much hard work, or it's it's too confusing, or they have self-doubt and they can't do the same thing that you can do, or they're always being critiqued on things and being told, no, that needs to be fixed, but they're never being told when something is right or given the next lesson, so they feel like they're stagnating, whatever, right? There's lots of reasons. So anyway, right? The other thing that goes on with this kind of thing is that we see that Kukan is a tool for deception, okay? So by controlling how the opponent perceives space, you can draw them into a false sense of safety or lull them into like overextending themselves and that kind of thing, okay? And this is where drills and all that kind of stuff comes in. So Friday's class, we're gonna do some of that stuff so you can kind of see how that works, all right? Anyway, so let's take a look at three little breakdowns with this kind of thing, right? Because the way I tend to look at these things influences this stuff over here, okay? So again, while Isoku Ito no Maai it kind of provides the baseline, right, for understanding striking distance, the way I approach this relative adaptability in this kind of thing, right, it touches on a couple of additional concepts, right? So the first one is tenshin, okay? Tenshin. Shin. Okay. So tenshin is the art of body shifting or repositioning within the same space, right? Within the same space to change the angle of engagement or to evade attacks while maintaining Maai, right? So I'm maintaining the same space. One of my students, Christy Rosini, if you're on for the Ninpo master classes or whatever, here of late, she injured her knee pretty badly. I'd say not in the dojo, but it did, but she ended up exacerbating things. It's a big $50 word that means she fucked it up more. So what we're doing is instead of her just sitting over there, and it's really cool, she doesn't take off time from training because I can't. The doctor said I can't train for 12 months. Okay. Well, the doctor's thinking about Taekwondo or ground and pound BJJ or whatever because he doesn't want lateral movement on your knees. He wants forward and back movement. Oh, where the hell did you hear that? In the dojo, right? So she comes in and she was taking notes, but what we've done is taken a chair and moved it off to the side in the dojo where she can feel like she's a part of class, and she's going to spend her recuperating time learning how to do these things we're doing in class, seated in a chair, not engaging the muscles that would cause the knee to move in a way that would cause danger. And the cool thing is this is a great opportunity for her. I know the injury sucks, but she can feel things now that she could never feel before, and that most of us who've never injured something can't feel. We can only theorize. If she does something incorrectly based on correct taijutsu, her knee will tell her instantaneously. That's a freaking gift. But most people, they take time away because if I can't train ideally, if I can't train perfectly, then what's the point? Well, so much for Nin, huh? Anyway, all right. So tenshin, again, this is maintaining Maai, right? So this applies when, not just when I'm moving inside here where I've changed my footwork on the fly, or I moved out here and changed and then moved back in. It's not just that. It's also if I shift angle, right? Punch comes in, I need him to be at a certain distance. So I can clock him with my lead hand, or I can connect with my hand at a certain point in his arm. I move to a certain angle, or I may have maintained a distance here. And then when he punches and I shift off, we teach this in Mod 1. When you do that initial naname movement, one, he sees the exact same thing he saw when you were using this as a guard. And then when you move off at that new angle, when he turns his eyes to follow you, he sees the exact same thing. So nothing on you opened up, but everything on him opened up. And the distance never changed. He did all that work to move forward, and he gained 0 ground. As a matter of fact, for white belts, he probably lost some. Okay? That's cool shit. Okay? So again, when we're stepping laterally or diagonally, without advancing or retreating, we maintain the same distance. That's tenshin. Okay? Tenshin. The next one is a term everybody knows or should know, right? Kudai dori. Right? Kudai dori, we talk about like catching the proper space, catching the proper timing, that kind of thing. The whole list of where the kamae are listed in the kotoryu is listed as kudai dori, and then you got kamae listed. People just associate kudai dori with the kamae. What the fuck? Seriously? They wasted ink and paper. Instead of calling it kamae and then listing the kamae, they called it something like kudai dori, catching the space, catching. What the hell is that? Right? So it's not just a kotoryu thing. It's often associated with the gyokoryu and other classical schools. Kudai dori involves positioning that maintains both optimal offense and defensive readiness, even during transitional movements. Okay, so your focus is on protecting space. Okay, while setting up attacks fits well within this principle as well, right? So when I talk about Tai Sabaki, and he throws a punch, and I move to a certain angle, right? I've done 4 or 5 things at the same time. I've avoided the shot. Everybody sees that. But the angle that I went to and the distance that I took makes it harder for him to get to me, easier for me to get to him. It took open targets and closed them off while moving to an angle that opens up all of his targets. So I'm harder to access, distance-wise and target-wise, and he's easier to access, all in the same movement, okay? All in the same movement. So catching the proper space, catching them, okay? Again, this has a physical space, but also a timing element to it as well, okay? And then there's this other one, right? And this is even more where the deception comes in here, okay? Because the deception here is in what the hell is perfect distance, because if this guy's a fist fighter or a boxer, he's not going to be paying attention to kicking distance, because for him, kicking doesn't happen, okay? For a wrestler or a shoot fighter, perfect distance is something different. And because of the way he does things and the experience with other people who do the same thing, he's not going to be paying attention to his head relative to my fist punching him in the back of the skull, because in an MMA match, you're not allowed to do that. Or he's never been punched with knuckles back there. He's been punched with gloves. Feeling's different, okay? So Enkyul, okay? Enkyul, again, I'm going to cut this short here. Enkyul emphasizes deceptive distancing, okay? Using subtle footwork and body movements to distort the opponent's sense of Maai, right? Where he can't properly gauge the distance and what the proper distance is. It's one of the reasons why with sword stuff, right? Let's borrow this without, right? So in the beginning of sword work, I have students put the sword right here because we're working on the cut, and this is where the cut starts. So I want them to practice on throwing the boshi. But for upper level people, I want the sword like this. But Sensei, you said, I know that was then, this is now, okay? Because the person I have doing this knows to throw the boshi. The person who does this and does it all with their arms, see how long it takes for the edge to get where it's going, as opposed to this, okay? This person knows how to do this and get the proper dynamic. What they're doing is concealing the length of the blade. They're hiding the blade from his view. It's the same thing with Ichi no Kamae. It's the same thing with several Kamae. You're hiding the length of your weapon so he can't take proper Maai, can't take proper distance, because he doesn't know what's too close. Okay? And that's the deceptive part. Okay? But your Kamae also do this as well. Okay, so I'll throw this little piece in here. Okay? Knowing what your Kamae do to his mind and his perception and his ability to gauge distance, like not only do a lot of people not understand Hira no Kamae, most people who do Hira no Kamae do it because it's a style thing. Okay, but understand that Hira no Kamae later on will become a bodyguard position, primary bodyguard position, because they're not trying to get me, they have to get through me. So I'm barring their way. It's a primary multiple attacker posture because it's a double-bladed Seigan, and I keep them inside the foul lines on the baseball field. Okay, but Hira no Kamae, if you understand it, Hira no Kamae distorts his ability to create, to manage distance, because Hira no Kamae makes it look like you are closer, farther, or whatever than you actually are. Okay, it distorts distance. Depends on his height relative to you as well, right? So taking that changes things. When I take up a Seigan as opposed to an Ichimonji, okay, but both of these disguise the length of the arm. If I take up a Doko, he gets a better sense of how long my arm is and what I can reach. He can see the length of this one. But when I take Ichimonji, not only do I hide one, but this angle is really, really important. If I do this, he sees the length of my arm. If I do this, it kind of warps it. I do hide it more, but it opens things up. So there's this sweet spot where my arm looks shorter than it is because Ichimonji invites him in. In Seigan, he can't quite place how far away my targets are because he doesn't know the length of the arm that's between me and him, which is why we don't do dumbass things where we bend it and give him hints as to how long or how big the targets are, or the limb is. Okay, very different. It's also not just for grounded stuff, so you're not slipping and sliding. When you bend and get lower, you don't just stabilize and all that, but it's harder for his brain to do the measurement between hip to knee and knee to ankle because it's bent. So does the brain measure from hip to ankle diagonally? It's harder for him to tell how tall you are, so he doesn't know your gait. He doesn't know the length of your step because, right? But people see this stuff and they go, yeah, it's kind of subjective. I don't do it like that. Well, fuck, you can do whatever you want. Okay? Do whatever you want. Okay? But that doesn't mean that you're maximizing all the power that you could be getting out of things and giving yourself the greatest amount of advantage. Anyway, so again, big overview, right? Kamai is another one of those things where you can use Kamai to distort his ability to do this, right? Which again changes the Kukan. It creates gaps. Because if you can create hesitation, right? If I can go from here to all of a sudden going to here, and right, he sees an opening, right? Because that was covered, and then now it's not, but he still doesn't know. So there's an opening, but right, that can give you an opportunity to cut and run, throw something, draw a weapon, or move in and tag it. Okay. So again, there's way more to this. Okay. So again, on Friday, we're going to be playing around with some techniques and some drills and whatnot to help people get a better feel for controlling distance and playing with the Kukan and that kind of stuff. But we're also going to be adding in this intuitive sense, which actually requires more experience and those kind of things, and getting out of your own way. Because if you're coming in with fears, anxieties, concerns, self-doubt, all those kind of things, your brain can't process what it needs to process because it's being clouded by your own assumptions or fears or anxieties or hesitancy, bullshit, whatever. Okay. So, and it has nothing to do with being tough. It has to do with getting out of your own goddamn way so that you're not an accomplice to your own ass kicking. Okay. All right. Pretty much it. I know I went 90 minutes again. I apologize. I'm trying not to let time creep make these things happen. But when I deal with concepts like this, as opposed to a given technique or a discussion about things, and for a while here, I'm going to be aiming at the advanced people. Not that I'm undermining anybody else, but this takes a little bit more to kind of get wrapped around. This also gives me, hint, hint, as I break these things down into smaller chunks, it gives me a block for a video. It gives me a block for a video. So here's the whole lesson that you guys got, but for the ones who are imperative or just want to skim lessons or whatever, well, there's one, whatever. And they'll point to the whole thing. But anyway, so I hope I see you for the Friday class. Please don't forget, there is, if you're a local student or you're typically on for like later classes and stuff, there is no 7:30 late class on Friday, November 8th, nor will there be a Saturday morning class or classes on Saturday, November 9th, because this is the weekend of our fall camp. Okay, so hopefully you can still make it. If not, no harm, no foul. If you are already on the mailing list, please check your email list, because today's the deadline for getting all of the camp recordings, like 10 plus hours worth of raw stuff, minimally edited, for like $67. Okay. After today, if I decide to keep it going, I'm probably going to have an increasing kind of thing, maybe through the weekend or whatever, but it's probably going to be like $97 or whatever. But if you want to get it for that, you just kind of jump in there. There's also a payment plan. Don't worry about it. Okay. But the Friday class, 60 to 75 minutes. It's closer to 75 minutes for a class. Sometimes it leads to 90, but like $9, right? Good ninja number. Anyway, that's what I have. Hopefully I'll see you for Friday's class. If not, I will see you next week for